Hi, welcome to another segment of Magnetoreception, or how to know where you belong by knowing where you are. And this is titled Proof of God, or My Way. I used to be on live stream, and in one segment I did on live stream, I mentioned how some misguided beings want other people to prove to them that God doesn't exist. Like, if you get into an argument with someone who's sure God exists and you tell them God doesn't exist, well, prove it. Prove it. You know what? And I touched on that, how it's unrealistic. It's even silly to try to get me to try to prove something doesn't exist. In fact, it starts with a logical fallacy. In order for me to prove that something doesn't exist, I almost have to start with the basis of it exists. Otherwise, it's just like, no, it doesn't. Well, that's not good enough. Well, the fact that you're saying it's not good enough means you want me to concede to you that it does exist, and I've got to explain to you that it doesn't. But that's not even the point of why I'm here. Why we're here. It's my belief, and that's what I'm sharing with you today, that God does exist. That God exists because I am God. You are too, if you want to be, but know that I am God. So not only do I exist, but I'm going to prove to you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that God exists and we're all gods. Now, many people like to think about they like to compare the reality of God versus the mythos of God, the legend of God. So when you talk about God with most people, they're thinking of all the big things they've heard. Well, God parted the sea, the Red Sea, and floods the lands. And God decimated the mountains and turned water into wine. Now, I'm not going to tell you that that didn't happen. And I'm not going to tell you that that doesn't or can't happen. What I'm going to say is that more concrete proof of the existence of God is out there. Not only is it out there, you don't have to go far to find it. In fact, proof of God is easy to explain, and it's even easier for you to understand. And basically, it breaks down like this: every living, sentient being is God. Now, you notice I didn't say every organism, so not microbes, not germs, things like that, but every living, sentient being. Although there is a link between every piece of matter, so the desk, the phone, the shirt, me, you. There's a link between all of us because we're all made up of the same basic building blocks. We all vibrate at various frequencies, but that's not even why we're here either. So, let's get back to the living sentient beings. So basically, animals and humans. In fact, true God status only equates with freedom of choice and the ability to make decisions. And that's whether you call it an instinctual nature or whatever. They still decide, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? And that, I'm talking about animals there. But now let's take your children for example, or anyone you know actually. You can advise them, you can threaten them, you can even bribe them. But they always decide exactly what they're going to do. Even when you know and share with them that their path is one of misery, suffering, and sadness unless they change their actions. Now let's go back to the animal kingdom. Think about how dogs suddenly turn and attack their owners. How it's said that you can never truly forget that every domesticated animal or every domesticated pet is still a wild animal at heart. And what that means is you can never rest everything has self-determination. So you can't just take it easy and say, oh, well, this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. Everything, every sentient thing is God. Now then, obviously animals are not quite on the same level as humans because, as far as we know, they don't make conscious informed decisions based on weighing of odds of success or failure and their resulting consequences. We know it, or we see it, as instincts. Not that we fully understand it, but we see it as instincts. But it's still something they can overcome and choose to do something else. So it's still decision making. Pardon me. So, but let's just stick with humans. No matter how appealing or enticing you make it for people to comply with your wishes, and no matter how painful you make the punishment or failure, well, the punishment for failure to comply, a good number of people are still going to go against your wishes. And even among those who comply with your wishes, a good number are still eventually going to break away from your direction, throw caution to the wind, and do their own thing. They're going to do it their way. So self-determination, no matter what the risk or reward, is concrete proof that every individual is God. Even, they're the God of their own lives. Whereas God, on the other hand, so that's God. I'm God of my life. You're God of your life. Now, God, on the other hand, is a collective made up of like-minded gods who determine to effect change on a mass scale. For example, let's take the Declaration of Independence. The single greatest God event of modern history. To think that the founders of this great country of ours came together, determined the goal, declared it would be done. Determined their goal and declared it would be done. Then they were able to get other like-minded gods to buy into their vision, their dream, and throw caution against the wind and embark on a path to war that led to the establishment of these great United States of America, which went on to become the greatest nation in the world. But that's because we banded together as individual gods, formed one collective God mind, threw off the shackles that England had us shackled with. Pardon me. Sorry. There we go. Now, the second greatest event in the history of this world is the plight of my fellow Jewish people. Long despised throughout the world and throughout time, Jews went from being a long-suffering group of people who were harassed and harangued, driven from every land, taken advantage of, literally hated. Pardon me. Literally hated. Only to, and we're not even talking about the atrocities of the Holocaust. We're talking about before that, because the persecution of Jewish people didn't start with the Holocaust. It's been going on for a long time. Whether it was the pogroms in ancient, Eastern Europe, it's, long time Jews have been persecuted. But in a short amount of time, went from being despised to literally controlling many of the industries of the world. It resulted from a collective God mind saying something is going to change. This is what's going to happen. Now then, so as God, as the gods that I am, you are, everyone is of their own life, each one has the absolute power to design life as we see fit. What we do, where we live, Others can attempt to influence us and advise us, but the final decision, and more importantly, the responsibility of the results of those decisions, belong squarely on our shoulders. There is no one else to blame, period. So, like I said, that's ultimate proof of God. The, G, capital G, lowercase o and d, individual God. I am God of my life. I control my life. My wife is God of her life. My children are gods of their lives. But God, the overall God, that's when like-minded gods, individual gods, get together and come to a God consensus, a God mind, and determine this is what's going to happen. All right, I'm out.